Hello and welcome to the NESN Patriots podcast. I'm Doug Kai, joined by Zach Cox.
Hello.
Zach, how are you doing?
Fantastic. Recovering from this post-combine week now. The combine just wrapped up. Yeah. I was not in Indianapolis like you, so you're probably a lot more tired than I am, but watching grown men run around in underwear for 4 straight days is exhausting. It's mentally draining.
Yeah, you got that draining portion in there. I was out and about for the combine. I feel like every time that they cut to anyone like during combine coverage, if they're like showing like, I won't name any names, but like coaches, media members, they should just start off by being like, hello, I am so-and-so, I am so hungover from last night. Because these people stay out until like 3 and 4 in the morning, and then they're either on TV or in the stadium at like 8 or 9. I do not know how all these people do it.
That's definitely unbelievable. That's definitely the sense I got from a couple of the early morning drills. The first time they cut down to one of the ex-players on the field, they're like, "Oh, glad you made it in today."
Yeah,
and
that's.
And they're like, yeah, it's going well. We're really happy to be here.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it seems like all week. But it was relatively eventful from a Patriots perspective. I felt like, despite the fact that Bill Belichick and Nick Caserio do not speak at this event. There's 28 teams that are represented at those news conferences at the podium. The Patriots are one of the 4 that is not represented. Usually Nick Caserio speaks to Patriots.com, but he didn't even do that this year. So nothing official coming out from a Patriots perspective, but there was some newsy bits out there, I guess I would say. First of which is that I thought it was interesting that former Arkansas head coach, former Wisconsin head coach, Brett Bielema, was at the combine as a representative of the Patriots. So could mean one of 2 things. Could just be Bill Belichick doing one of his buddies a favor by getting his name out there. Could be that he could potentially join the defensive staff. So what did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, Arkansas has kind of become the new Rutgers in the last couple of years with Trey Flowers and Dietrich Wise both coming out there. That's kind of the Patriots' new feeder school almost, and now with Brett Bielema not there anymore, maybe he does have an opportunity on this Patriots staff. But the Patriots did do a similar thing with Greg Schiano. What was that, 2 or 3 years ago?
2014, I think.
Yeah, and he was there to help out at the combine, and then never ended up doing anything in an official capacity for the Patriots. So it's kind of a wait and see kind of thing. It is interesting though.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting to look at because with the Patriots, they don't have a lot of coaches who come in from other staffs. So there's not a lot of experience with some of these guys that come out. Bill Belichick basically just has to rely on what he hears from college coaches or what he hears from people that he knows around the league about some of these players that they could sign or some of these players that they could bring in out of the draft. And if he's got a guy like Brett Bielema in his ear about maybe guys who used to go to Arkansas who are in the league or are free agents now or the guys who are coming into the league right now from the draft, it's just another guy to kind of latch onto and hear about what the Patriots could potentially get out of.
Yeah, it's a whole kind of different pool of resources because, like you said, so many people on the Patriots staff, both from a scouting perspective and a coaching perspective, have been in New England for almost all of their careers. Right. They kind of start down as these low-level assistants and rise their way up. Bringing a guy in from outside of the organization, especially someone like Bielema, who's been around football forever, it seems like, is going to have all sorts of those connections, those kind of relationships. And even if he's not added in an official capacity, you can probably bet that he's going to be a guy that Bill Belichick can definitely call up and ask him some questions.
Definitely. Another interesting bit of news that we kind of discovered while we were down there was that the Patriots really weren't showing much interest in quarterbacks, which I don't think you need to read into this too closely, but I think that that was one of the reasons why we went down there. Like, let's talk to quarterbacks, who the Patriots are meeting with. But the fact that Josh McDaniels wasn't down there, I didn't see Jerry Shaplinski down there either. I didn't see Chad O'Shea. Some of these guys might have been there because you don't really see Patriots representatives around a lot. But basically from talking to quarterbacks, talking to offensive players, they were saying, I don't think the Patriots are meeting with any offensive players because I don't think their coaches are around. One guy who might have been around was running backs coach Ivan Fears. Or it's possible that the prospect who said he met with Ivan Fears was just confused because
thought he met with Ivan Fears, was actually meeting with somebody else.
It was actually like DeJuan Daniels or like some like scout or something. But one thing that I will say about, well, there's a couple things to say about McDaniels not being down there. First of which is that I think that everyone's kind of assuming that Josh McDaniels just didn't want to go to Indianapolis because that's kind of a bad look for him.
Fair point.
At this point, because he did eschew that Colts job, kind of screwed them over a little bit by agreeing to become their head coach and then not actually going there. So Josh McDaniels walking around Indianapolis for a week might not be the best idea. Josh McDaniels being around NFL circles for a week might not be the best idea. But also, I don't know how much he really could have helped out with quarterbacks, because if you're a Patriots coach and you go into a long playoff run, you make it all the way to the Super Bowl, you get to the Super Bowl, then you basically give the coaching staff like a week or two off to readjust. They're basically just getting back into things, and they don't know who the hell any of these prospects are.
Yeah.
The way I understand it, if they're interviewing players at these things, they're basically saying like, well, tell me about yourself. There's not a whole lot that they already know about these prospects. So I think that this gives Josh McDaniels a few more weeks to kind of learn about the quarterbacks before those pro days start up and before some of the visits start up, when he actually has seen these guys play, because at this point, he probably hasn't seen much of them.
Yeah, I mean, the pro days and the visits are kind of the times where they'll be able to dig in a little bit deeper on these prospects too, kind of not just hold a 15 minute formal interview. You can say, who is it? Adam Butler last year said he sat down with Bill Belichick for like 2 hours and watched film at Vanderbilt's pro day. So that really gives them an opportunity to kind of spend more time with these prospects. It was a little bit weird that they just didn't go at all. None of these offensive coaches showed up, especially with quarterback being such a big kind of position of need from a future standpoint. But there are still almost 2 months before the draft, so they do have plenty of time to kind of dig into these guys. And the thing with quarterbacks too, it's a smaller pool to choose from. It's not like a edge rusher or cornerback where there are 60, 70 guys you can look at. They're really only looking at 10 or 12 maybe, and some of the people on the top of that list are going to be out of their range anyway, so it's not as much legwork there. I know you want to get it right because it's a very important position, but they definitely do have a little bit more time to dig in here.
Yeah, definitely, and you can cancel out some of the lower ranked guys as well, because I mean Caserio and some of the other Patriots scouts and front office execs, they've been watching these guys, so they certainly have pinpointed which players the Patriots should and will be interested in. So there's probably only a pool of like 4 or 5 guys.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I feel like at this point there's probably, maybe 5 that they're zeroing in on. Maybe somebody else could kind of come up on their radar over the next couple months. But yeah, that's probably a safe bet.
Yeah, and I talked to 2 guys, Riley Ferguson out of Memphis, and then I guess someone else talked to Logan Woodside from Toledo. They, when you talk to them, you're like, oh, who have you met with? And they're like, oh, I've met with everyone. And then you say, the Patriots? That's the one team I didn't meet with. It was just like a weird, circumstance.
We can also, you might be able to chalk some of this up to the fact that we have heard in the past that sometimes the Patriots tell prospects not to tell the media that they've met with them.
Right.
And that kind of strikes me as a little, if they met with 31 teams and not the Patriots, maybe. I'm sure there's a little bit of gamesmanship going on with all this. But overall, I mean, one of my takeaways from the Combine was that you couldn't really judge all that much from any of the quarterbacks. I mean, there are so many of them. There's really 4 in that upper echelon with Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, and
Sam
Darnold. Yep. All of them, they all went through most of them went through throwing drills and everything. Sam Darnold was the only one who didn't do that. Everybody was talking about Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson didn't run, but he did do throwing drills. And then going further down the list, you've got guys like Mason Rudolph and Kyle Lauletta and Luke Falk, Mike White, a couple of these guys. We went into the week without there being a kind of consensus number 1 or anything close to a consensus number 1. And we came out of the week with there not being anything close to a consensus number 1. I mean, a lot of guys still like Sam Darnold up at the top. A lot of guys like Josh Rosen. Some guys like Josh Allen, especially those the PMT guys that were from draftjoshallen.com. Yep. But yeah, I mean, I was watching these guys work out on what was it, Saturday that the quarterbacks ran through. It's just, I mean, at that point, I was already getting a little bit of combine fatigue, which is probably not too good on my part. But there's only so much you can tell. I mean, if you just judged by the combine, Josh Allen should be a Hall of Famer already, because he had a fantastic day. I mean, he's throwing the ball like 85 yards out there. I think it was like 75 yards, but still. Yeah. And I mean, especially with quarterbacks, there's only so much you can take from the combine. It just gets talked about so much. I think the only thing that we really took away was that Lamar Jackson is not a wide receiver. He's actually a quarterback. Yeah. He's at least going to try to be an actual quarterback. So, other than that, it was kind of an underwhelming week from the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I do like Baker Mayfield, though.
Yeah,
I think he's personally, I would love to cover Baker Mayfield.
Oh, absolutely.
I would not complain at all if the Patriots found a way to get him, which I don't see happening at all.
Yeah,
but
it seems like it would be tough.
Yeah.
I did try to talk to as much of the guys who are kind of in the Patriots mix as possible. Lamar Jackson's news conference was interesting to say the least. He spent a lot of time laughing because there was a lot of questions about whether he would move to wide receiver, and he just kind of kept laughing and saying like, "No, I'm a quarterback." Like, I don't even know where this is coming from. At one point, someone asked him, "Well, if you get drafted to be a backup, would you be willing to play a different position while playing behind the starter?" And then Lamar Jackson just started laughing. He was like, "That's just a different way of asking me if I'll move to a different position." So that was interesting. Mason Rudolph was very confident. He's a very confident guy, which I didn't really know anything about him heading into the combine, so that surprised me a little bit. Luke Falk I was really impressed with, but that might just be because he makes eye contact, which that might impress NFL coaches too. But he didn't do a lot of the drills because he's still recovering from a wrist injury.
Yeah, some of his throws didn't look all that good in the drills that he did do.
And I talked extensively to Kyle Lauletta. I did a big feature on him. If you want to check that out at NESN.com, talked to his dad, talked to his uncle. Lauletta was very impressive from the interview perspective. He certainly already talked like he was a Patriot, and then it was a situation where I really needed him one-on-one for this feature that I was writing, and it wasn't working going through other avenues to try to talk to him. So I was walking away from the interview room at one point, and Kyle Lauletta was walking down the hallway. I was like, I just had to ditch the beat writer I was with. I was like, "Kevin, I'll see you later. I have to talk to this guy," and ran to catch up with Kyle Lauletta. And one-on-one, he was even better. So I think that he's a guy who will really ace those interviews.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about Kyle Lauletta is that it seemed like he really strengthened the kind of hype train that he is. I don't want to say the second coming of Jimmy Garoppolo because he is a little bit of a different player. He tested a little bit differently. He actually tested better than Jimmy Garoppolo in a lot of regards. But yeah, overall, between his testing and what he did in the throwing drills and like you said in the interviews, he's definitely a guy that's going to be continued to be heavily linked to the Patriots over the next 2 months.
Yeah, and he's kind of been linked to a lot of other teams as well. Apparently the Redskins like him, and I forgot what other teams have been linked to him.
He seems to be. I mean, like a month ago, he was a 6th, 7th round prospect, and now people are saying that he could go in the 2nd round. So
yeah, so that's definitely notable. Some of the more things from a Patriots perspective, I heard from a source that running back Rex Burkhead should see a pretty big market in free agency. I think we all kind of expected that anyway, based on the contract they signed last year. It was just a 1-year, $3.15 million deal. So it seems like he might be looking for something a little bit longer term this time around, maybe less annually. But we'll just have to see if the Patriots are willing to pay that, and if another team is willing to give him even more than that.
Yeah, I think kind of the sense that we had coming into the weekend, I guess, or at least earlier in the offseason, was that the Patriots should be able to bring back one of Dion Lewis or Rex Burkhead, probably Rex Burkhead, because it doesn't sound like Dion Lewis sounds like he's going to make too much money to come back to New England. Right. But if from what your source said, if he does get that kind of interest, maybe you could see them losing both of those, which would really kind of hurt their offense. Which was why I was watching a lot of the running backs out at the combine. Really deep running back class this year. A lot of exciting players. A lot of guys that kind of fit into the Patriots mold. I think 2 of them that were exciting were Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, both of them Georgia prospects. Obviously, they were kind of formed basically the best backfield in college football last year. I think I like Michel a little bit better for the Patriots. He had averaged 7.9 yards per carry last year, which is obviously insane. Neither of them really caught the ball all that much, but I think they have the ability to. And some more under the radar guys, Chase Edmond from Fordham and Justin Jackson from Northwestern, who both of whom I didn't know much about at all going into this weekend, but they dominated the 3-cone drill, which is basically the Patriots prerequisite for running backs. They were super productive in college, both catching the ball and running with the ball. And yeah, there were a couple more names on there too. But did anybody stand out from that running back class from those interviews that you guys had?
Edmonds, it would be wonderful if he was in the Patriots locker room, because he was a great talker. From when I was talking to him, he went to Fordham, CAA school, and it seems like he's not a guy who
Patriot League.
Patriot League. Yeah, that's right. Richmond is CAA. Fordham is Patriot League.
UNH is CAA. So I got the CAA down.
But yeah, he was a great talker, and he's a guy who it seems like can kind of catch out of the backfield. He had an injury in his senior season, but he's not a guy who went to Fordham because of some problem at a different school. He went to Fordham all the way around, like from his freshman year to his senior year, and he had a good career there. And then the other guy that I liked a lot was Jalen Samuels out of NC State.
Really interesting player.
Very interesting player. There's not a whole lot of slot receiver / short yardage backs in the NFL. I don't think there's any, but Jalen Samuels could be the first. He was listed as a tight end, which he was talking with the tight ends, and basically my first question was like, why do you have TE on your sweatsuit rather than running back? And he seemed a little bit bummed about it because you don't get to go through all the drills with the running backs. He's a 5'11", 225-pound player.
It's like Tim Tebow.
Right. Yeah. Like no one's looking at him as a tight end.
Yeah.
So for him to go through all the drills as a tight end seems like it's almost kind of a waste of his time.
Yeah.
Teams are looking at him as a running back, basically a running back who can kick out a wide receiver. And usually those guys are about 205 pounds. They're not 225 pounds. And as I was talking to him, because you kind of go into this combine a little bit woefully unprepared for the amount of players that you're going to talk to. I had been looking at Jalen Samuels for a few years, but I hadn't really followed his career that extensively. So as I'm talking to him, or as other people are talking to him, I'm looking up his stats. I see that he's got 12 rushing touchdowns as a senior, and I knew that he caught the ball 77 times as a senior as well. So I was like, were you like a short yardage back too? He was like, yeah, they put me at the goal line, like third and short situations near the goal line. I was like, so you're a slot / running back, like / goal line back? He's like, yeah. I was like, all right, cool. I mean, so that's a player that the Patriots could certainly use. They need kind of a short yardage back. They love running backs who can split out into a wide receiver and a slot. So I'm certainly looking at him. He played with Jacoby Brissett at NC State, so I think that he would be a good guy. Another guy who ran a sub 7-second three-cone, which is very important if you're going to be a Patriots running back.
Yeah, he was definitely a really cool player to watch out there this weekend. A couple other quick names from running backs: Kalen Ballage from Arizona State, Mark Walton from Miami, Akram Wadley from Iowa. There's one guy, another NC State product, Nyheim Hines. I think it's Nyheim. He was a guy that early in the week was talked about as a potential Patriots guy. I know he said that he met with the Patriots out there, ran the fastest 40 of any running back at the combine, but had really, really poor three-cone and shuttle drills, which kind of really kills the Nyheim Hines to the Patriots conversation. But yeah, definitely a lot of interesting names in there. And one more, Saquon Barkley. Patriots have zero chance of getting Saquon Barkley, but he was probably the best player at this entire combine. And he also produced the best anonymous coach quote. Did you see this? There's an anonymous assistant coach who said he would punch myself many, many, many times in the nuts in order to draft Saquon Barkley. The third many in there is what pushes it over the edge for me.
Many, many, many times. Yeah, that's fantastic.
But yeah, he's going to be a monster. There's talk that he could be the number 1 overall pick right now, especially since the Browns have 2 picks in the top 4. Wouldn't be a crazy thing to see now.
Yeah, personally, I wouldn't do that. But if they so choose to do that, then that would certainly be interesting if they went Barkley and then a quarterback. A couple other just quick things on Patriots defenders. Harvey Longy, who suffered serious injuries in the car accident, he's good to go for 2018, so that's really good news. That adds some more depth to the Patriots pass rush, Patriots linebacking core, so that's good. And then the other thing is that you kind of talk to people out there about certain free agents and everything. Name Marquise Flowers came up a couple times, and basically people asking us what kind of deal we thought he would get. And when I mentioned to a certain team that, I wouldn't be surprised if he got like a Jonathan Casillas deal, they were bummed by that idea. So I think that he's not a player that teams are going to be looking to start, but I think he will be a hot commodity as a depth linebacker / guy who can contribute in special teams. And if there was any hope that the Patriots could bring him back on a veteran minimum salary, those hopes pretty much went out the window. He will be one of those kind of lower middle class signings in free agency, and he deserves it. There's not that many super athletic linebackers who are only 25 years old. Yeah,
I can see him as a guy where if he played anywhere else this past year and the deal that he's going to get this offseason, I think we would see it and be like, it's a little bit much for Marquise Flowers. But from us actually watching him all through the season, from what he did on special teams early in the year, and then really being one of their best defensive players over the last 4 or 5 weeks of the regular season, yeah, he's definitely going to get a little bit of a pay raise there. And be a great guy for the Patriots to bring back from a defensive versatility standpoint. But yeah, like you said, he might end up pricing himself out there.
Yeah, definitely. A couple other things, obviously, that we gleaned down there.
Busy week. A lot of stuff going on.
It was very busy. Very tiring week. Very fun. Like I said earlier, like sometimes you just walk into these interview rooms with prospects, and you're like, I don't know who any of these people are, so I'm just going to start talking to someone. And when I saw that there was a safety from Stanford, Justin Reed, I saw that he was, first, second round prospect, maybe a guy that the Patriots could get in either the bottom of the first round, top of the second round. So I started talking to him and asked him if he had a formal interview with the Patriots. Found out they had a formal interview with Bill and Steve Belichick, which is certainly notable. And in talking to that guy, you can certainly see why the Patriots would be interested and why they might be impressed with him. So let's listen to a little bit of audio of him just kind of talking about, just basically listen to him talk, and you'll know why we're talking about him from a Patriots perspective.
I had a formal meeting with the Patriots. Bill Belichick was in the room. His son was in the room. A variety of guys. I really enjoyed talking to them. They have a couple of our Stanford guys themselves. Johnson Badamosi, Jordan Richards.
Did you have a relationship with those guys in the past?
Yeah, they come back and visit. They come back and visit campus from time to time, and I'll just talk to them. A bunch of good character guys.
Was that Steve Belichick, the safeties coach, who was in there with you?
Yeah.
What was it like just talking to him and Bill, I guess?
It was cool. I know they heard about kind of how intelligent of a player I am, so they kind of wanted to quiz me to see what I do. They brought up some film, asked me what I was doing in this coverage, what were some of the linebackers doing in the coverage, what I was thinking, what I saw, some formation alerts, some formation tendencies, things like that, just to get a feel for how I saw defense. And I feel like I left an impression.
It seems like you really like talking ball.
I love talking ball. Love talking ball.
So are these interviews like kind of a...
No, they're fun.
Yeah, they must
fun.
be a dream.
It's not stressful at all for me. Like I thoroughly enjoy. I have 20 formal interviews, and I enjoy going to each and every one of them, just being able to talk ball with these guys and see their perspectives on how I play. Hear their criticism, hear what they think about me, and also provide my own perspective. And Justin Reed certainly helped himself at the combine today. He ran a 4.4 40,
4.4 flat, I think. Yeah.
4.4 flat 40. That's pretty impressive for a safety. That's even more athletic than his brother Eric Reed, who went to LSU, who's a solid player for the 49ers. I did watch a little bit of Justin Reed. Maybe not the tackler the Patriots usually like, but maybe that's something that they could coach up once he gets to the NFL level.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of Justin Reed. He was a guy that I had my eye on coming into this weekend from the kind of prospects listings that we did a couple weeks ago. He's a guy that caught my eye. Just a super versatile effect. I think he said he basically plays all over the field for Stanford. He had senior year, he had 94 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 5 interceptions, 6 pass breakups. He was just all over the field, really kind of making plays in every area. And like you said, I know you tweeted, you said he was one of the smartest prospects that you've talked to. He definitely seems to have that kind of Patriots intelligence level, football IQ level, and just general IQ level, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's already started. The Patriots are going to draft this guy, and people are going to think he's going to be Jordan Richards 2.0.
Right.
Just because a guy plays the same position and went to the same school does not mean they are the exact same players. These are very, very, very different players, which you could tell by watching Justin Reed on tape for 5 minutes, probably less.
Oh yeah, just size perspective, speed perspective, versatility perspective. Jordan Richards was a guy who had to move to linebacker. Yeah. Justin Reed was playing slot cornerback a lot. He was playing free safety, strong safety. He said he played a little bit of linebacker, but was mostly in practice and like kind of a pass rush role. But this guy could probably be a coach like right now. He was like unbelievable to talk to, and definitely one of the most impressive guys I've ever talked to at like a combine or draft perspective. He said that the Stanford had 12 base defenses. He could mark down on a chart what every single player on the field did, and if you're playing 7 different positions in the defense, then I guess that's kind of necessary to do. So I don't know if he'll fall to the Patriots. I don't know if they'll be willing to spend a first or second round pick on a safety, but he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on because of some of those intangibles that he brings.
Yeah, this year safety, not a glaring need for the Patriots. I wouldn't even call it a real need. I mean, with all three of their starters in Devin McCourty, Patrick Chung, and Duron Harmon all coming back next year. But Patrick Chung is entering the last year of his contract, correct?
I think so, yeah.
And they could use an upgrade from Jordan Richards, who we mentioned before, who was their number 4 rather, safety during this season. I don't think I would use a first round or that top second round pick on the position with the other needs they have, but Justin Reed's definitely a guy that I can see slotting in there. Safeties overall today, I was watching them on, they were incredibly athletic this year. You had about a dozen safeties that were running in the 4.4s, 4.5s. This guy Troy Apke, who I've never heard of in my entire life, from Penn State, ran a 3.43, which was I believe the second or third fastest time in the entire combine. So it just shows that this position is getting so much more athletic with at the NFL level and at the college level, coaches asking them to do so many different things. I mean, a lot of the guys, some of the top safeties, and Derwin James and Minkah Fitzpatrick basically could play safety or cornerback at the NFL. There's talk of both of them moving over to cornerback. So it's a very, very athletic group. You're going to be getting a good player at going 5 or 6, 7 deep in this group.
Definitely. And the other thing about Reed, he is bigger than a typical slot cornerback, but the Patriots do have needs at cornerback. So if that's a guy who they think eventually could be their future strong safety, you could slot in there at slot cornerback for a year or two, then maybe you do make that pick. But we'll just kind of have to see what they do over the offseason, what they do in the draft, or everything. But some other guys just around the combine that caught my eye a little bit. Ohio State defensive end Sam Hubbard. He's a guy who you just kind of almost have to mention because he played high school lacrosse, almost went to Notre Dame.
He had to turn down a lacrosse scholarship at Notre Dame at Ohio State.
Went to the college football, gained like 65 pounds or something.
I believe he was a safety either in high school or coming out of high school.
And I mean, he was a 6'5", 205-pound safety, and then they figured that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, so let's have him gain some weight, play defensive end. And
basically Joey Bosa light for the Buckeyes this year.
And he's another guy who's kind of in that late first round, early second round range the Patriots could potentially get. Linebacker out of Boise State's another one. What's his name?
Leighton Vander Esch.
Yes.
Member of the all-name team for this year's combine.
Yeah, I've made about a dozen jokes that I'm pretty sure that's actually a character on Gossip Girl. That's not a future NFL linebacker. But he talked like a Patriot, I would say. Another guy, just from reading through transcripts, Washington's Will Dissly, he's a tight end. Here's another guy who really talked like a Patriot. So if Patriots are looking for someone who will be a little bit more of a boring quote, Will Dissly, Washington tight end. And he's kind of an interesting guy as well because he played defensive end, I think, until he was about a sophomore. So he was a tight end in college. I think he wore number 98. And
I love it.
I'll just read a quote. He's from Montana. I think he actually is from the same hometown as Dane Fletcher, who was a Patriots linebacker for years. The question was, you tortured Montana the first time out, didn't you? And he said, yeah, you go out there when your number's called and you try to make plays, but that was fun for a lot of Bozeman fans, I'm sure. So
I don't like this guy already.
Patriots do have a need at tight end. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, you go out there when your number's called.
Yeah. Go back to quickly Vander Esch for a second. He's a guy that's been mentioned in some mock drafts of the Patriots around number 31. It seems like a lot of people view him as a late first round pick. He could have boosted his stock here. He tested very well at the combine, but he's a very athletic player. Patriots need to get more athletic at linebacker. I think that's going to be one of their top needs this offseason. Going into the draft, I advise people to go on YouTube and check out Vander Esch's tape against Oregon. Oregon, rather. Sorry, I know Oregon people get very, very.
I'm almost an Oregon person.
I know. I apologize.
I just got very triggered.
I apologize. But yeah, against Oregon in the Las Vegas Bowl, he had a fantastic game. I think he had like 15 tackles. He was all over the field for them. Definitely a guy that I'm going to be watching going forward. Another guy who we didn't get to see on the field, Maurice Hurst from Michigan, who is the son of a former Patriots cornerback, went to Zavarian Brothers High School in Westwood, raised in Massachusetts. He was diagnosed with a heart condition the day before the defensive linemen were scheduled to go out and hit the field, so he did not work out. Heart condition obviously is a pretty scary thing, but it's also something that can go a lot of different ways. I mean, just a couple years ago, Star Lotulelei, coming out of Utah, and was diagnosed with, I don't know if it was a similar condition, but it was a heart condition. Then he ended up going through additional tests a couple days later, and was fine. Practiced at his pro day, was a first-round pick. So this is a guy I really like, Maurice Hurst, on tape at Michigan. I think he's a beast in that interior defensive line. Maybe this could be a case if right now it looks like he's projected as a top 15 pick, but if he slides a little bit, he could be an option for the Patriots in that late first round, early second round.
Definitely. One other guy that caught my eye a little bit was Stanford defensive tackle Harrison Phillips. He's another guy who's in that first, second round area, and I had already talked to him a little bit, and then when I was talking to Justin Reed, he had a funny quote that was like, how many nose tackles do you see that lead their team in tackles?
What do you have, 103 tackles?
98 total tackles last year, 17 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. He's 6'4", 307 pounds, 42 bench reps of 225 pounds, which is unbelievable. Had a great 3-cone time, 7.28, which is, that's better than you see some running backs and wide receivers do. 5'2", 140. So I think he's a guy who will interview well. He's a guy who definitely showed up well athletically. And Patriots might have a need at defensive tackle. It's not a huge need. It's kind of similar to safety, but with Alan Branch on his way out, who knows what's going to happen to Malcolm Brown in the next year or two. He's a guy who obviously could have potential 4-down or 3-down versatility on a defensive line since he had 7.5 sacks last year.
Yeah, he was really good against the run at Stanford. I was watching a little bit of his film earlier in the week. Really long arms for a guy his size. You kind of see him on tape, and he looks like he's sort of like that classic. I think a lot of people have been saying he's built more like a guard than a nose guard, because he does look a little bit strangely proportioned. But he's got very long arms. He was a high school wrestler. I believe he was a 2-time state champion. Wow. You know how Bill Belichick loves those cross-sport athletes there. So yeah, he's definitely a guy that I think you're going to hear talked about a lot to the Patriots over these next couple weeks. Another guy like him in along that defensive line, Taven Bryan from Florida. People are calling him the J.J. Watt Jr. He plays more on the inside than J.J. Watt does, but he's probably got the quickest first step of anybody that I saw that I've watched on film so far in this draft process. He's another guy that could be available, kind of that late first round, early second round area. So again, defensive tackle, not a huge need, but he's a guy that can bump out a little bit. So another name we're just going to be throwing a lot of names at you guys over the next couple months, and we're probably going to be wrong with most of them.
I mean, the interesting thing in this draft class, or this draft for the Patriots, is that it's a year where they could take almost anyone. And you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they could take a quarterback.
Basically,
probably won't take a running back, but they could. They have a need there. The one position is probably wide receiver.
Wide receiver and like interior offensive line,
where you probably don't see a lot of need there, but almost everyone else. And then since we just said that wide receiver and interior offensive line, watch them take a wide receiver and a guard with the first 2 picks or something, and surprise the hell out of everyone. But it's certainly an interesting year for us to be covering this, because I mean, you just don't know what position they're going to be aiming at.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's been different from the last couple of years. Obviously, I think losing the Super Bowl makes people kind of divert their attention toward the draft a little bit more and care about it a little bit more, because obviously if a team lost the Super Bowl, it's not perfect and it does have flaws. I think this Patriots team has some very apparent areas of need that everybody from watching this team from the past year can kind of see, and the quarterback angle just adds a whole new level of intrigue to this. I mean, it's unlike any other position in sports, really. I mean, the Patriots haven't needed to I mean, I know they have drafted some quarterbacks during Tom Brady's career, but we haven't gone into any draft saying, hey, they really need to draft a quarterback in this draft. And would it be the end of the world if they didn't draft a quarterback? No, but going in, I think they really do have to. It's going to be fascinating to see who they end up getting.
Yeah, definitely, and it needs to be someone who is willing to back up Tom Brady for a couple of years. So actually, let's listen to Kyle Lauletta, the guy we talked about earlier. Let's listen to him talk a little bit about what it would be like to back up Tom Brady potentially for a couple of years.
I mean, that'd be a dream come true. I mean, I think any quarterback would love to be in that position. I think, learning from a guy like Tom Brady, you can get so much just by the way he works and just by observing, the way he goes about his business day to day. So wherever I end up, I think I'll be in a good spot, but that would definitely be a good one, no doubt.
Kyle Lauletta, interesting enough, is a Philly guy, so I think that as recently as a few weeks ago, he probably wasn't the biggest Patriots fan, but if he were to be drafted by the Patriots, that obviously would change. And one thing that, while we're on the topic of the Eagles, I know we already kind of talked about Josh McDaniels a little bit already. One thing I just kind of thought of while we were in Indianapolis, and as I was listening to Howie Roseman talk, and as I was listening to Doug Peterson talk, underrated storyline of Josh McDaniels screwing over the Colts, for lack of a better term, is that the Eagles might have got the most raw deal out of all of this, because they obviously thought that they were going to be retaining their offensive coordinator, Frank Reich, because all of the head coaching jobs were filled. So then they allowed John DiFilippo, who's their quarterback's coach, to become the Minnesota Vikings' new offensive coordinator. Then, when Josh McDaniels turns around and says, no, I'm going to stick around New England for a few more years, then Frank Reich gets hired away by the Indianapolis Colts, and the Eagles are sitting there without their offensive coordinator. They're sitting there without their offensive coordinator and waiting, so they have to bring up Mike Groh, who's their wide receivers coach, to become their new offensive coordinator, and he kind of leapfrogs two guys into that role, and it's a little bit different for most teams. It doesn't affect things too much just because Doug Peterson is basically the offensive coordinator. He's the play caller in there, but I think they would have much preferred to have John DiFilippo be that offensive coordinator rather than having to hire up their wide receivers coach in that.
Yeah,
in that deal.
They basically had to go from number one in Frank Reich, who obviously was pretty highly regarded if he got hired this quickly. I know there weren't many options after Josh McDaniels kind of pulled his stunt, but yeah, now they're left with basically their number 3 choice. Yeah. And like you said, it's not as big of a deal on the Eagles as it would be elsewhere, since Doug Peterson calls the plays and he basically kind of handles the whole offense anyway. But it's a wrinkle that a Super Bowl champion probably wasn't expecting to have to deal with this quickly.
Absolutely. So just before we wrap this up, obviously, we saw a ton of prospects this weekend. What was it, like 300, somewhere around there?
Way too many, yeah.
Unbelievable amount. I think that it's funny because, like you said, I was in Indianapolis. You were watching the drills at home. You probably have a much greater sense of these guys than I do, because I almost kind of have to concentrate on other things. You pick one or two guys at these things. So who are just some other guys that kind of caught your eye this week or this weekend from either a Patriots perspective or overall?
From an overall perspective first, Shaquem Griffin.
Yep.
I think he was the star of this entire combine probably. Obviously, Shaquem Griffin is the linebacker from UCF who had his left hand amputated when he was 4 years old, I believe. Went on to be, he was the American Athletic Conference Defensive Player of the Year this year. Did 20 bench press reps with a kind of a prosthetic little robo arm on his left hand, which was impressive in his own right. And then he comes out and runs a 4.38 in the 40 the following morning, which is the fastest recorded time ever by a linebacker at the combine, at least dating back to I believe it was 2003 or 2006 when they started keeping track of all these measurements. So it's incredible for this guy, and he wasn't even invited to the combine initially. He was kind of a late invite to this whole thing, and obviously he does have the physical disability that a lot of players, and basically every single player in the NFL, does not have to deal with. So that's something he has to overcome. But just with the athleticism he showed out this weekend, with just kind of the all around the strength and the quickness and the speed, and the fact that his tape is very impressive. The fact that he was a Defensive Player of the Year this past year. He's a guy who's going to get drafted, and there's not really sure where teams are going to put him in the NFL, because he's a linebacker. He's bigger than his twin brother, who plays cornerback for the Seahawks.
Griffin,
But he's going to be a guy that's kind of one of those hybrid linebacker, safety, partially edge rusher kind of guys. He'll kind of play all over the field. So you're going to need a good defensive coordinator to kind of put him in the right spot. But he's a very intriguing prospect, and he went from a guy that maybe could have been lucky to get drafted. Now I'm almost certain some team will take a chance on him.
Yeah. I mean, I watched his interview a little bit from the podium. I just feel like this guy's going to be a stud in the NFL. I feel like this is going to just be one of those incredible stories where, I mean, I think when you're coming into the combine, you're thinking like, all right, because of his physical limitations, like maybe you can't play him on passing downs. Maybe because he only has one hand, like it's gonna be tough for him in coverage. He doesn't have, quite the reach, frankly, with his other arm. But after you run a 4.38, you almost have to put this guy in on passing downs. He's shaped like a passing down linebacker. He was the second most productive edge rusher in college football last year by Pro Football Focus's metrics. Yep. He only had 7 sacks, but he had 51 total pressures. As a junior, he had 11.5 sacks. He had 20 tackles for loss. He was unbelievably productive. He had 3 interceptions in college, which is unbelievable. He had 16 pass breakups. So, I mean, those physical limitations certainly didn't limit him in college. Well, I'm on this too. 4 forced fumbles, 5 fumble recoveries. I don't know.
Incredibly productive. Yeah.
I just feel like he's going to be someone who just beats the odds and gets it done despite his challenges, because he was just so good in college. He's so fast. He's so athletic. If you're looking at this guy, if he just to be brutal, if he had 2 hands, I mean, you might be looking at a first-round prospect, and I just don't think it will limit him so much that he won't be able to overcome it.
You see the Patriots taking him like the 4th round?
I could see it.
I would not be surprised at all.
Hell, they took Matthew Wells in the 6th round of the 2015 draft or 2016 draft, and he was blind in one eye. So I think that is a little bit more limiting than only having one hand. So I could absolutely see it. I'm rooting for it. Kind of feels like the Seahawks will be the team that takes him because he already has a relationship with them because of his brother. But
they showed a clip of Pete Carroll after he ran that 40, and he was thoroughly impressed. You could tell.
One, I guess, while we're talking about Pete Carroll and the Seahawks, Pete Carroll said that the Seahawks are willing to pretty much shop anyone. Yep. After the week, it seems a little bit more likely that they'll trade Earl Thomas than Richard Sherman, because Pete Carroll just randomly announced that Richard Sherman had a cleanup surgery on his other Achilles.
That was a little strange,
That was a little bit mind-blowing. But I know that Patriots fans have been high on Richard Sherman. It's still possible that deal gets done, but might not happen for a while just because of that surgery. But anyone other out there that you were kind of looking at?
There's some Patriots, potential Patriots, we can call them. Colton Miller, the tackle from UCLA, might be out of the Patriots' range now with how well he tested over at the Combine. I mean, he's been compared to Nate Solder a lot, which is kind of a coincidence that the Patriots could lose Nate Solder this offseason. He would be a pretty great replacement for him. It looks like he's 6'9". He ran a 4.95. He had a 10.1 broad jump. Really, really athletic. I've seen him linked to them at number 31 a little bit. Obviously, that it's all going to depend there on whether they do bring back Nate Solder or not. But he might have kind of tested himself out of that range, especially with Orlando Brown performing as poorly as he did in the tackle drills. Who else we got here? Just a quick notebook cleanup. Harold Landry, BC guy, tested very well, very confident. Lorenzo Carter from Georgia did pretty well. Josh Sweat, who I hadn't heard of much at all, from Florida State. I haven't looked at his tape at all. I don't know if he'd be a Patriots type guy, but he had some very good numbers in all of the drills. And then there's a lot of cornerbacks that have been kind of mentioned in that late first round area. It seems like there aren't any top tier cornerbacks outside of maybe Minkah Fitzpatrick, but there's a lot of names that have been mentioned in the second half of that first round. And Mike Hughes from UCF, Dante Jackson from LSU, Josh Jackson from Iowa, Isaiah Oliver from Colorado, Jair Alexander, Louisville, MJ Stewart, UNC. This is a position that we're going to have to kind of dig a little bit deeper on as we get toward the draft. I'm sure we'll talk about it in depth, with the Patriots almost certainly losing Malcolm Butler in free agency once that starts up in just about 9 days, 10 days?
Yeah, 14th I think it is.
So in the lead up to the draft, we'll definitely have a lot more on those cornerbacks. But yeah, a lot to take in from these 5 days, and now it's just about kind of digesting it, and while also keeping in mind that the Combine, it's a little bit easy to forget while you're watching all of this, but the Combine is still a relatively minor tool in evaluating these players. I mean, there's only so much you can so you can only simulate so much on an empty field in the middle of in early March. Basically, you got to watch these guys on film, and coaches have to sit down with them and all that. But yeah, definitely a busy 5 days. A lot of coverage from us, and a lot of coverage coming up on the next 2 months.
Yeah, absolutely. So keep it on NESN.com for all of that Patriots coverage. We will be back for more draft coverage, more free agency coverage, everything with this podcast. So that will do it, I think, for this week.
Solid first episode.
Certainly
world premiere.
Formerly known as Between the Tackles, but now it is NESN Patriots podcast. So I've been Doug Hyde. Thank you, Zach Cox, and we will talk to you later.